Yeah,
Yes, please, let's get started.
great. So good afternoon once again. I'll say this one more time right now, and then again when we get to the Zoom control slide. If you're receiving an invitation to join as a panelist, please accept it. That'll allow you to use the chat function to see the other participant list and mute and unmute easier. Anyone on the call will be able to participate regardless, and we'll talk about those opportunities for participation. But we ask you to accept that panelist invitation if you receive it. So thank you again for joining. My name is, let's see, there we go. My name is John Overman with Cambridge Systematics. We are a consulting firm helping the Washington State Transportation Commission with this Washington Transportation Plan update. I'm joined by several colleagues online who will be helping monitor the Q&A and the chat, as well as helping to make this meeting run smoothly with some of the dynamic features we're using today. I'm happy to be joined by Paula Reeves, the project manager on the commission side, who is going to welcome you all and kick things off.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you all for taking time this afternoon to talk with us about transportation. As Jonathan said, my name is Paula Reeves. I'm the Senior Policy Analyst for the Washington State Transportation Commission. If you could turn to the next slide. I have the good honor here of introducing the commissioners, but before I do that, I just wanted to thank Thera Black and Mark Daly, the MPO directors from the region, for supporting this and helping us get this up and running and get the word out to all of you. We really appreciate your time. So for those of you not familiar with the State Transportation Commission, they're an independent body of 7 citizens, and they're appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. There are 3 of them from the east side of the mountains and 4 from the west side. You may recognize some of them from your own community. Next slide, and I'll just tell you briefly about their role. They have a broad role that covers quite a bit. They propose transportation policy and finance recommendations to the governor and legislature, and that comes in the form of meetings and public forums, and also our annual report that we produce at Washington Transportation Commission. They serve as a state tolling authority, adopting state highway and bridge tolls and setting ferry fares for Washington State ferries. Probably most importantly, they provide a public forum for transportation policy development like this discussion, and they hold 11 meetings across the state each year. We were just up in Edmonds, and soon we'll be in Cheney and Chelan. They conduct special legislatively directed studies like the road usage charge and advanced technology study. And last but not least, they author the 20-year state transportation plan known as WTP that we're here to talk about today. And with that, I will turn it over to Jonathan for the most important part, which is hearing from you all. Thanks again.
Thank you, Paula. So here's the agenda for today. So we'll have a few slides just to welcome you, talk about the Washington Transportation Plan, just a brief high-level overview of the plan and what we're trying to get out of the meeting today. The majority of the conversation will focus on our statewide planning priorities, as well as your local, regional, statewide challenges and opportunities. So in those sections, we're going to use Mentimeter polling, which is fairly easy to use, and we'll show you how that works in a minute. And then group discussion. So, we love collecting information via the poll because it records it for us, but we'll be asking you to provide some nuance, explain your answers if you're willing, and also to respond to what you see from others. So hopefully this is an interactive conversation, and looking forward to that from hearing from all of you. Finally, we'll wrap up with next steps, and also if there's anyone on the line who would like to provide any updates on something you're working on in your community, we'll have some time at the end of the meeting for that. We do have 2 hours for the meeting, but I think we'll probably wrap a few minutes before that. So I mentioned Mentimeter and Zoom, and I've said this a few times now. If you are a a panelist, you're able to click on the participant link and rename yourself. So you can put in change your name if you want. You can add your agency that you're representing, and so we can see who's on the line. If you are a panelist, you can also use the chat functionality. You can also mute and unmute. Members of the public, if you have not received an invitation to join as a panelist, there is a Q&A option for you to ask questions that the panelists can see, as well as staff. You can also email any public comments to transc@wstc.wa.gov if you have a general comment about the plan. Anyone on the line will be able to use the Mentimeter polling function. So this is the time to test that out right now. So if you go to menti.com in your smartphone or a browser window, I'm also going to put the link to that in the chat. So will be a direct link to this room, and enter this code 33730336. And that's going to be the code we're going to use throughout the meeting. So you don't have to refresh or anything. You don't have to remember that code. We'll remind you about it numerous times if you get lost from that site. So can someone, Sarah, would you mind throwing that in the chat as well?
I encourage you to go ahead and try it. We're not tracking who says what during this, so yeah, free to express your thoughts.
So Wayne, I don't see that I've entered the code and it said it could not be found.
It's not loading me up either.
So bear with us while we launch the meeting.
Give me a second. We should be already launched. Bear with me a minute.
Okay, so sit tight. You can think about these questions while before we launch the code. So these are a couple pop quiz questions just to test out the software once the right meeting gets loaded in. The first one is, in 2023, there were roughly 8 million people living in Washington. How much did it increase since 2000, and what is the expected growth by 2050? So don't go Googling, but just think about, you'll get a multiple choice question when that pops up. And then also think about the growth in electric vehicles since 2010. What if it's about 140,000 now? How many were there in 2010? So we may skip these questions and come back to it in a minute if we can't get them loaded up. So what I'm going to do is stay on this slide. And again, reminder, if you've received an invitation to join as a panelist, I know there are several folks who are representing public agencies as attendees. So if you get that link to join as a panelist, please accept it. And also I'm going to turn it over to Thera Black to just say a couple words of welcome. And Paula already said thank you to Thera for helping to get the word out about this event. But do you want to just say a couple words of welcome as well as we're loading up this quiz?
Sure. Actually, but the only thing I would say myself is I'm not an executive director of PRTPO. PRTPO is a regional transportation planning organization, and I'm a coordinator, but our chair is in the meeting, and I'd love to turn it over to Lindsay Schroman-Warren, if I could, please.
Thanks, Thera, and thanks, Jonathan, and everyone else who's helped to plan this. Yeah, I mean, to Thera's point, we organize as an executive board of elected officials and others from the regional organizations, and Thera is our amazing staff member, so we appreciate everything you do. Hi, Lindsay Schroman-Warren. I'm a Port Angel City Council member, Clallam Transit Board member, and current chair of the Peninsula Regional Transportation Planning Organization. Thank you all for choosing the Peninsula region to base one of the 6 outreach meetings, and including our partners all along the 101 corridor, where you can now ride zero fare all the way from Westport up to Port Angeles and Port Townsend and back down to Olympia, probably not in a single day. The commission is an ally of rural regions and has long worked to bring rural issues and opportunities to the attention of the legislature, and the commissioner's last visit to our region was 2018, and we look forward to your next visit. The Washington Transportation Plan is a long-range plan for the state, like the Regional Transportation Plan is for our region. So we see these things dovetailing together really well. It raises hard questions and pushes forward big ideas, planting the seeds for future legislative changes. For example, its last update in 2018 proposed that small local projects be defederalized so that agencies can get more done with existing resources. And today there's a pilot program in place to do just that. We've talked about that a lot at the local level and how beneficial that is. The Washington Transportation Plan put the issue on the radar, and PRTPO joined with others to help get it over the finish line. So thank you for working together. The Commission's annual report to the legislature in January featured big ideas regarding rural mobility, including a rural resilience program and an enhanced role for rural regional transportation planning organizations. This dovetails neatly with Peninsula Regional Transportation Planning Organization's own discussions about resilience and how to better fund our regional transportation planning organization work. I'm looking forward to hearing how these and other rural concerns fit into the next update of the statewide plan. So thank you all for joining us together and having us virtually out here on the peninsula.
Totally amazing consulting team just rebooted, and we have a new Menti code to enter so you can access the questions. It's in the chat, and it hasn't been replaced on the screen here, but go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'm sharing screen, so I'm not going to change that right now, but I think hopefully the future slides will magically update themselves as we go along. But the code, the code is, oh, it did get updated. Okay, so it's now updated 36406084. Or you could click that direct link to participate in the first quiz. So if you're an attendee, the code is now active 36406084. You won't be able to click that direct link, but it should. And please type in the Q&A if you're having trouble accessing that. So thank you, Thera. Thank you, Lindsay, for giving that introduction and for allowing us to troubleshoot a few things as we get warmed up here. I won't put Katrina from TRPC on the spot right now, but I'd love to hear from you throughout the meeting, and we also welcome folks from Olympia and Thurston County to this conversation as well. Okay, so let's look at the results so far. I see some answers coming in, which you all can see, and hopefully others' answers aren't influencing your response. But so far, you're a very astute group. Yes, it's the middle bar. So about 2 million since 2020, or sorry, since 2000, and about 2 million more by the year 2050. So about 10 million people in the state by 2050. Next question. So stay on that same screen and it should refresh for you. So there are roughly 138,000 light duty battery electric vehicles registered in the state present day. How many were there in 2010? Okay, so the answer is actually 79. So that's a tough question. They're all very low numbers relative to 138,000. So it's sort of a flip of the coin, but yeah, it just goes to show how much growth there's been in that technology, and really want to get you thinking about how much could change in the next 20 years as we think about this long range plan. Okay, so thank you for getting used to the Mentimeter. We're going to be using that tool throughout the call today. Some multiple choice questions like we just utilized. There'll also be some short answer questions. So when we start talking about your priorities, the challenges and opportunities, will allow you to type in more information into the Mentimeter. So please keep that link active, and we'll remind you about it as we continue. Okay, so I'm going to spend a few minutes just giving you an overview of the Washington Transportation Plan before we get into the meat of the conversation. Here's a schematic that shows the Washington Transportation Planning Framework at a very high level. So you have the Washington Transportation Plan as the umbrella, you have local and regional plans as nested under that umbrella, and then you have these other components. Now we're using the umbrella here not to show that it's the most important plan in the state, but really to show coverage, that the desired outcome and the goal of the plan is to be inclusive of all modes, all jurisdictions, each element of the Washington state transportation system. You have the owner operators like WashDOT has modal plans like the highway plan, the bike ped plan, other multimodal plans. You've got local and regional plans like the ones that were already mentioned, and as well as MPO and RTPOs throughout the state, city comprehensive plans. So those plans in themselves are much more in tune with the local conditions in your communities. They have a lot more detail on transportation system performance and the deficiencies. So those are equally, if not more important than the Washington Transportation Plan itself. But this plan, the WTP, is really trying to set the statewide direction, the vision for transportation planning for the next 20 years, so that those other plans can kind of work towards that common North Star. Other elements like capital projects and programs, prioritization, ongoing performance measurement and monitoring and implementation generally fall under those local and regional transportation plans, as well as the statewide plans. So as our team, Cambridge Systematics, Enviro Issues, working with the commission staff, we're setting out to update this WTP, and here are some of the main tasks. And I just wanted to note that this is building on previous work that some of you were very involved with, where the last and most recently adopted plan, the current WTP 2040, is still the plan. And you can find that at the link on the right side of the screen. It's called the WTP 2040 and beyond. And this plan offers an opportunity to build on the previous work, as well as the statewide transportation system goals, which we'll talk about at length in the next section. But it also gives the state an opportunity to update the plan and be reflective of current priorities, be reflective of the challenges and the new policy direction that's coming from the legislature. So that's the framing. In practice, we're really trying to understand from you all today and others what your current priorities are, where you see those challenges and opportunities with respect to transportation planning and projects. And ultimately, we'd like to form those short, medium, and long-term recommendations to address the challenges. So we're here just about 8 months into the process in that phase 1 of outreach, talking about challenges and opportunities. There are going to be additional opportunities to contribute. This is the 4th of the 6 regional meetings that we're hosting over a several week period. We'll also have topic focused meetings, which I can discuss a little bit at the end of this meeting. We'll have additional regional meetings in early 2025 after we've come up with the draft recommendations. And then finally, you'll get a chance to review the draft plan before it's adopted by the commission at the end of 2025. So just to kind of put a final point on what we're trying to get out of today. Number one, we want to gather feedback from you all to help inform those the recommendations that end up in the Washington Transportation Plan. So this is understanding priorities and challenges from you all, and this is also just an opportunity for us to engage with you, for you to engage with each other, and to hear from transportation stakeholders throughout the state. So with that, we're going to shift gears and talk about the state planning priorities. So feel free to use the chat. If I'm going too fast, you can tell me to slow down. You can raise your hand, and we can discuss. But there'll be some opportunities for contribution very soon. So if you're not familiar with the state system-wide policy goals, transportation policy goals, they're here. These 6 goals are economic vitality, preservation, safety, mobility, environment and health, and stewardship. So economic vitality, ensuring that the transportation system promotes a prosperous economy, preservation and maintenance, extending the life of transportation assets, both safety and security for transportation users, mobility, focusing on both people and goods, the movement of people and goods, environment and health, emphasizes quality of life as well as the natural environment, public health. And finally, stewardship really focuses on making sure that the state of Washington is making good use of their resources. So there are finite resources, and it's important that the resources are used efficiently. Safety and preservation have been the highest priority from the legislature, and just wanted to note that these have been in place since the year 2000. So we're now in 2024, so they've been around for a long time. They're still very relevant, and these are similar goals that you'll see in lots of the regional and metropolitan transportation plans and city plans throughout the state. So these are pretty standard and important transportation system goals. However, since the year 2000, and even since the last WTP update, which was 2018, there are emerging policies that have come from the legislature that are coming from the federal government. Some of these policies or issues are listed on the side here, relate to funding, like the Move Ahead Washington Transportation Package being an important step towards funding more capital projects, but still the system is not fully funded, especially with respect to maintenance and preservation. Road user charge is something the commission has studied for a number of years as a way to fill some of the gaps in funding. You have several important policies related to climate and greenhouse gas emission reductions. The Climate Commitment Act being one of the obvious ones, but you also have changes to the Growth Management Act, and the transportation, or the climate elements in city comprehensive plans. Other things like VMT targets, multimodal level of service. These are some of the guidance that are coming down from the state level to cities. You've got the HEAL Act, which really focuses on environmental justice and equity, and is really important in all statewide planning. So there we have the system goals, we have these new and emerging priorities, and the WTP offers an opportunity to reframe or repackage some of the recommendations in the plan, or to rethink about how some of the recommendations can be organized and be messaged around some of these emerging priorities. So we're going to introduce a concept of policy pillars, and we're going to hopefully get your feedback on your reaction to these pillars and to these concepts. So I'll show these definitions each time we ask the question, but we will be asking some questions about these 5 policy pillars in the subsequent slides. I'll read them here because it's a lot, and I want to make sure to message this. So the first policy pillar relates to funding. So this is sustainable funding. Long-term funding solutions adequately addresses current and future transportation maintenance and enhancement needs. Climate and resiliency, a future transportation that is resilient, redundant, and helps to mitigate and lessen the impacts of climate change. Connecting communities, transportation investments reconnect communities, close gaps in the network, improve access to opportunity, and improve quality of life. Equity and movement, transportation planning supports historically underrepresented communities in planning processes and outcomes. And finally, transportation technology, the state is prepared to adapt to new technology in ways that further our policy goals, including safety. So these are, conceptual policy pillars, and we've added some working definitions. But again, as I mentioned before, we're only 6-8 months into the project, and so these we're looking for feedback on these policy pillars today. What's missing, what you like, what you don't like about these as an organizing device for the Washington Transportation Plan. So what would that mean for the plan itself? I have a couple of illustrative slides. This is not a dot matrix that's meant to represent every connection between, say, sustainable funding and the 6 goals, because sustainable funding is really important for all 6 of those goals. And so this is just to give you an idea of how an action or a strategy that relates to one of the policy pillars could also support the transportation system policy goals. If we want to get more specific, these are 2 actions and policies from the WTP 2040 plan. Again, we're revisiting that plan. We're going to be developing new recommendations. Some of them will be the same as the previous plan. Some of them will be new. But two examples here from that plan. One is incentivize the use of clean technology and energy efficiency in the freight sector. This is an environment and health action in the current plan that could be organized in the transportation technology pillar and also address environment and health as well as economic vitality and stewardship. So that's one place that it could find a home in this new framework. Another policy from the previous WTP is to work to ensure that all people have access to their daily needs with dignity and independence, regardless of their ability or income, or without discrimination based on race or other identity. So that is a policy or action that could relate to equity, that new policy pillar, but also supports the goals of mobility and safety, environment and health, as well as stewardship. So again, this is just an example of how the new policy pillars could be a framing device for the WTP update. So with that, I'd like to get some feedback on what you think about these policy pillars. So please get your Mentimeter polling back up. And we have 3 questions about the policy pillars. The first one, is it easy, or at least a quick one? Do these policy pillars generally capture the top transportation priorities in your region? It's simply yes, no, or partially. On the second question, you'll get to add some nuance, explain why or why not, what could be added or removed. And then the final question will ask you to kind of rank some of these priorities. So please load that first question up. It should be the same quiz. And if you're just joining us, go to menti.com and enter 36406084. Okay, great. So equal mix of yes and partially. This is what I was sort of expecting or hoping for. It's great to hear that it generally captures the top priorities in your region, right? But it may not capture all of them. But if you're reading this and it's the top priorities, then maybe you said yes. I can imagine that even if you said yes, there might be some things that you would want to add, and then a lot of people saying partially. So maybe it gets a few of the top priorities, but not all of them. So on the next question, let's go to the next question. You'll get to answer what might be missing, what would you add or remove. I'm going to show you the policy pillars and hide that view so that you can, let me just get down to the next slide. Same policy pillars. Let me get to it. There we go. And the question is there anything from these policy pillars that's missing? And if so, what would you add or what would you remove? Okay, I'm going to keep my screen active so you can see those, but I'll read a couple that have come in, which you can see yourself. So safety, is it mostly in connecting communities? That's an open question. A couple referencing multimodalism, so expanding multimodal choices, wondering where ferry fits into this sort of multimodal system, linking land use and transportation. That's a great one.
Can you show the responses, John?
Yep. So take a mental image of the policy pillars if you're still thinking about those, and I can also go back to that screen. Increasing mobility along I-5, maintenance and funding, specifically local access roads. And so some of these comments are also getting into there's a natural overlap between this section and the next section, which is challenges and opportunities. So we definitely want to revisit maintenance and funding and some of the issues, I-5 mobility. But think about as policy pillars, as sort of these conceptual, this framework for understanding the system or the recommendations from the plan. What might be missing, and then we can get more into specific challenges in the next section. Would be nice to see what goals live under each pillar on the slide. It'd be nice to make it easier to identify the gaps. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it's something we tried to do. And there's even on any way you slice goals, there's always going to be overlap. And in the last plan, there were some kind of connecting themes or cross-cutting themes that went across. It's really difficult to pull out and say this goal always lives under this pillar because there's so much overlap. And so I think if I were to redo that dot matrix that I showed earlier, would be, every goal pretty much relates to each of the policy pillars. And so it really comes down to the specific recommendation to say this particular recommendation addresses these goals and really furthers that or it really makes sense under that particular policy pillar. Policy pillars don't expressly include mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. Transportation and land use are interconnected. I'd love to hear more about the transportation and land use connections. That's come up at each of our meetings, but it's hard to understand how this policy plan can or should really lead in that space. So I really want to hear from you all about that. Okay. Any final comments here before we go to the last question? We'll come back and we'll have a little bit of a group discussion on some of these. So we'll do a quick ranking exercise, and then we can come back to these answers in the group discussion. So final question is going to ask you to rank the policy pillars. Now, we're not going to be using this to prioritize any of the pillars. This is just a way to get us thinking about these priorities and really to inform the next part of the conversation. So you should have an option to click and drag the pillars from first to fifth in importance, either on your phone or the desktop version. Also, I'll note that if you have a little button in the top right corner of your Mentimeter and it says, host has skipped ahead, make sure you click that button to skip ahead to the right question that we're on. So again, here are the policy pillars. Which are the most important in your region? Please rank them.
If you haven't joined, you can join at any time by entering www.menti.com and typing in the code 36406084.
Okay, time for another one or two responses. So you can see that sustainable funding has jumped to the top. This is obviously very important to fund any of the projects, to address any of the challenges. And I think that's been fairly consistent. Maybe one group didn't have that as the top. Also, transportation technology tends to be at the bottom. And my guess is that it's really a kind of a tool to address some of the other challenges. But we'll see if that comes out in the opportunity conversation. I'd like to kind of come back to open this up for a group discussion. And so if there's anything that you put into the chat, the Mentimeter poll related to what's missing from the policy pillars that you want to expand upon, I'd love to hear from you now. I can get a copy of that slide and post it or share screen to see if you forgot what was on there. But does anyone want to come on and share what they put in and why? Yeah, Lindsay?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I was one of the people who mentioned land use and transportation planning. And I put in the chat, which I realize attendees can't see, is that there's a book from 2001 called How Cities Work, Suburbs Sprawl, and the Roads Not Taken by Alex Marshall that I think is a good introduction to this, that we often think, well, we do the land use planning and then the transportation comes in to fill in the gaps, but often it can work the other way around. And where we build streets and roads or stroads really can influence where we end up seeing development, and we don't see it necessarily in patterns that create multimodal, complete street, walkable neighborhoods the way that we really need. And a lot of our work, I think, at the city level as a city council member is trying to figure out how we use what we currently have to make it more walkable throughout a place like Port Angeles. But then also how do we connect these places and not just see, what our current plan is probably doubling the drive time between Port Angeles and Squim, because there's going to be so much sprawl in the rural areas between these two places. We need to make the urban areas more urban and the rural areas need to stay rural and not just end up with this mix match in between. So that's an incentive for us as cities to do better on making areas more walkable or densifying. And it's also an incentive for counties, or they need to be given the incentive to not sprawl into areas that shouldn't be developed. I don't think any of us want the outcome. I mean, we live here because it's a rural area. We don't want the outcome where it's just a suburb for hours and hours of driving. But that's really what we're planning for right now. And roads play a big role in that. I think, WashDOT and other road owners are in a tough place right now on the Olympic Peninsula because we've created this sprawl corridor in, for example, between Port Angeles and Squim, that can't be easily designed to be safer, and yet it has a lot more traffic on it at the intersection. So there's a lot of complaining right now about roundabouts and why are we putting in roundabouts, and is that going to slow traffic down? But that's what we've created by our own land use. So it's hard to say what's the chicken and what's the egg, but we have to think of them as two interconnected pieces.
Thank you, Lindsay. Does anyone have any reaction to that? Any additional thoughts on the land use connection to transportation? Sarah?
Jonathan, I would just piggyback and say I feel like what we've done for the last 30 years often is try to solve land use issues with transportation solutions. But I also think we also have to acknowledge that as human beings, a lot of us are conflicted. I want to live in a walkable place where transit is as convenient as driving, but I also want my large backyard. My acreage, like people, we're just inherently conflicted. as a community, the things that we want oftentimes cannot be supported by the lifestyles that we choose to live or have to live, as the case may be. So I think that there's always going to be this inherent tension, and the more we can have plans like the WTP help make us all a little bit smarter about some of those contradictions between what we say we want and what we actually are willing to put up with. That would be helpful in this regard.
What do you think how could the WTP make that more clear? Or what kind of recommendation would you want to see coming out of the WTP to help shed light on those contradictions or the challenges facing land use and transportation?
I think the WTP is really good at is talking about matters in plain English. You know, and so and it's not, and maybe just by however it's addressed, it's not a judgment. It's just, let us all just acknowledge we are conflicted. And so I don't really, you know, I don't really have a strong recommendation, but just to keep broadening that awareness that every time, you know, to Lindsay's point, every time we make a concession on these land use plans, well, we're just going to let this one come in at lower density, or we're going to let that a little bit higher density. It's just that one subdivision. Every single one of those is just compounding the problem, and you know, it'll be decades before that area redevelops into something, you know, more multimodal supportive. So I don't really know that I have if I had the fix for this or the recommendation for this, chances are I probably wouldn't be sitting here in this meeting chatting with you guys. I'd be off doing something really famous and glamorous, but and the world would be just a better place. But it does I don't really know, but just I think that the WTP format and who you're, you know, like you speak to so many different people, you know, at all different levels. And so you're not just talking to planners and planneries, but you're talking to lay people and policymakers and others. And just, it helps them just increase their awareness. I think the WTP is a great vehicle for increasing awareness about some really complicated issues.
Thank you, Tara. Other thoughts on what you shared or what you saw? I've got an image of what was put in the responses, because I know you can't see it anymore. So, you know, multimodalism came up a couple times. Preservation, maintenance. Anyone else want to chime in on what you see here, what you put in the poll? Yes, Christine?
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, voice that going forward with the plan, the group, the Transportation Commission seems like it needs to recognize that a major component of the transportation system on the peninsula is broken and needs to be repaired and then sustained. And so my comment was related to the ferry system. Like there weren't any of the policies or goals that were like fix what's broken, right? Like it's just a glaring problem that I think it's easy for people who don't live here to think is normal and accepted, and oh, it'll get repaired. If it's not a goal to have a functioning, vibrant ferry system, we won't have one.
Yeah, thank you so much for that comment. Okay, we're going to move on, and this is beginning the conversation that we're going to have next, which is about challenges and opportunities. So keep thinking about some of these challenges, such as ferries, deterioration of the system, right, as we get into the next section. So why long-range planning? And this is a pretty hokey image that shows what communication may have looked like for you in the year 2000. This is very similar to a cell phone I had in, I think, 2002 or 3 on my first phone. I'm on a headset right now. I don't have the Vision Pro, but communication's changed quite a bit over the last 20, 25 years. I could make a similar image or a slide showing transportation with an old sedan in 2000, a semi-driverless or driverless car today, or a cyber truck. And so the pace of technology change is great. And that's pretty obvious, I think, to everyone in the room, but I think it's just important. It's easier for us to look back 20 years ago than it is for us to think about what's going to happen 20 years from now. And so how do you create a plan that addresses that uncertainty, given that the future is so unknown? So that's the exercise we're going to be thinking about today. Not only what's, the issues of tomorrow, but also the issues of 10 years from now, of 15 years from now. So just a quick pulse check to see how you all are thinking about the future. Pull up your Mentimeter poll one more time. Well, we'll do it a couple more times, but pull the poll up again and just give us 1 or 2 words about how you're thinking about the future of transportation in Washington. Okay. I think we're getting a good mix of what we might expect. Some hopefulness, some uncertainty, some unease, right? There are a lot of big challenges. It's important to have, hope. Otherwise, probably wouldn't be here on the call today. But there is definitely there are a lot of challenges. Some specific things around maintenance and expensive and right. Those are specific challenges. And then yeah, a lot of thoughts about messiness and being unprepared, and hopefully we can get better prepared for it. Okay, so they'll keep that running. You can keep adding words in there as I cover a couple more slides before we move to the next question. So that's great. I appreciate all your thoughts. Again, you can keep adding to the word cloud. Now we really want to hear from you again about some of the future challenges and opportunities. So we'll ask you to think about short-term and long-term, kind of all at once. And so as you're thinking about this, maybe think about what a challenge it could be in the next 5 years, what a challenge it might be in the next 25 years or 20 years. When we talk about challenges and opportunities, here's our definition, but you can define it how you want. Challenges being external forces or barriers that may prevent the state or your local region from reaching the transportation goals. So in this case, an example might be switching to non-combustion vehicles. So switching to electric vehicles, reducing the gas tax revenue. Opportunities are things where external forces, the state could be positioned to act and benefit upon. So if the state makes the right or positions itself, if it employs strategies to take advantage of those opportunities that could benefit the state and address transportation goals. Here's an example where artificial intelligence makes it easier to process data and address system deficiencies, improve safety, improve mobility. So that's one example. When we talk about the state, we're talking about the entire state of Washington, not just WashDOT, but you can also represent your own community, and really we want this to be sort of from the bottom up. So if there are challenges in your communities that you think need state attention or could benefit from state collaboration or regional collaboration. We want to hear about those. So just before we get into that, I just wanted to note that we did talk to Thera. We talked to Thurston County TRPC as well, but we didn't get an exhaustive list, right? That's why we're doing more of these calls. We're going to continue to engage with partners throughout the state. But some of the emerging issues we heard when we spoke for some initial calls did highlight things like the ferry system, resiliency and redundancy, especially in rural communities, preservation, maintenance and operations, ferry system again, but also roadways and bridges and you name it. These are not in order of importance, by the way. Resources for rural planning, safety continues to be a big issue, and everywhere we talk, access to freight data and understanding truck movements going through smaller communities. Equity has come up again and again. So some of the issues that we've heard in having some initial conversations in your region, but want to hear now from you about first the challenges and then the opportunities facing the state in the next 20 years. So that's the question. So if you pull up your Menti poll again, please provide some feedback on in the next 20 years what you think the biggest state transportation challenges will be. Again, you can go to menti.com, enter 3640-6084 if you left the poll. Okay, I already seen some related to funding and aging infrastructure, resources for maintaining and preserving transportation infrastructure. Target 0, so safety, reducing serious and fatal injuries. Grid capacity, reliability for transportation electrification. I like that. That's come up a few times in other meetings. Improving wildlife connectivity and preserving habitat. Climate change, definitely a future challenge. The cost of construction, absolutely, and that's related to funding, to making sure that that escalating costs can be covered by future funding. Retrofitting roads, bridges being a challenge. So here's kind of specific cross peninsula trails along state highway corridors, Hood Canal Bridge. So very specific kind of multimodal improvement. Shifting from an energy intensive, high individual costs and financially unsustainable private focused transportation system to a public transportation system. Sea level rise. Fish passage, so the culvert issue. The safety on 101. Okay, these are great. Please continue to add other challenges. Weight impacts of EVs on local roads. Good one. Transportation improvements in rural and urban transition areas. So that the kind of interface there. Hydropower. Someone want to share their thoughts on what they put in here? And maybe whether it's you see it as more of a near-term challenge or a long-term challenge? Yeah, Lindsay?
I give space for others to talk too, but I put in the comment about shifting the way that we think about our transportation system from a privately focused one to a publicly focused one. And, you know, futurists have talked about how AV vehicles will change the way people travel. And there's kind of two scenarios. One could be, you know, that we are able to more efficiently get around and use existing resources to, you know, get more people where they're trying to go at a better rate. Another scenario is where people who have their automatic vehicle can just let it drive around the block while they eat in a restaurant and not have to worry about not having a parking spot. And I think one of those would be a disaster for the system. The other one achieves our goals in a number of ways. It's going to take a change in our mindset to say, you know, it's not about just me and my car. It's about this collective system that we all manage together and we're all responsible for together. Thanks.
Thanks, Lindsay. That's a great point. Yeah, without sort of some protections around sprawl, you wonder if people will just, you know, live further and further away and just sleep in their car on the way to work if there's sort of, you know, a lowered cost of transportation, so to speak. So definitely kind of AVs can bring about a lot of good, but need some policy framework surrounding it. Yeah, Kate?
Yeah, that was a great point, Lindsay. I actually didn't comment on salmon, but since I work in the fish passage world, I just wanted to comment that I think the future is bright in that arena. I don't think it's a challenge that is going to worsen. It's hopefully only improving from here just because of the regulations, especially in Washington state regarding that. But I wanted to address the comment that says fish passage barrier work happening before road width planning completed, especially due to complete streets. We are now looking at that a lot more holistically while we are doing these culvert replacements. So again, not necessarily, I agree that it's a challenge, but hopefully there are already things in place that could maybe be called out in the plan on how we're addressing some of those challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Yeah, I think this could also blend into an opportunity. We've heard about, you know, opportunities to combine maintenance projects with potential expansion or, you know, efficiency projects. And so this could be another example where you're doing a fish passage or a culvert project, but you can also combine it with another project. So love to hear more about if there are other opportunities for you know, bundling of projects or at least collaboration to address some of those challenges at the same time. Okay, anyone else want to comment on what you're seeing here or what you put into the chat? Yeah, Melissa?
I just wanted to say that EV electric vehicles, electricity is, or battery electric is a fuel source. And autonomous vehicles, it's not the same thing. There's 138,000 EVs registered in Washington. Very few are capable of driving while you sleep.
Did I say EV? I meant to say AV. Apologies. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for correcting the record. There are some comments here about grid capacity, reliability for transportation electrification. That's come up as both a challenge and opportunity in previous conversations with other regions where, you know, questions about does the state have enough grid capacity as a net importer of electricity now for electrification, for decarbonization, while others have brought up the point that EVs, electric vehicles, could be help with sort of load shifting and actually plug into the grid and charge off peak and sort of some of that load balancing. So I think it's an interesting and complicated future there, and just speaks to how important it would be to engage the utilities more. And then frankly, they haven't been at the transportation table as much as they probably should have been in the past. And so, yeah, there.
Yeah, and that was actually my comment. And in the Peninsula region, we've been working with the PUDs. I mean, the whole thing with electric vehicles is, they're transportation just because they got wheels on them, and we use them for mobility, but they're just unlike, I'm hoping that somewhere in this meeting are others who are also trying to navigate those waters with their partners of, you've got really non-traditional transportation, non-traditional partners. You've got PUDs and charging companies and public works directors sitting down trying to figure this stuff out, and it's brand new for everybody. And the one thing that we've been hearing is that so much of the state's NEVI policy is really geared towards the interstate highway corridors. And so, having requirements for 4 DC fast charges at a single location in rural, like, between Forks and Amanda Park, the grid capacity is not there to support it. There's a question whether you even really need 4 DC fast charges in a place like that. And so I feel like the grid capacity issue in rural Washington is just a really different kind of a consideration than is in urban places, because again, we're trying to get distance between the certain spacing between these facilities. And you get out there, and if your transformers, if you got to upgrade your transformer and run new wiring capacity for 30 miles to get it to where your charger is, I mean, it's just really complicated, and it's happening really fast. There's a ton of money for it, and the people who are tasked, the local staff and the PUD staff who are tasked with putting this stuff together. I mean, I just don't think the process has any consideration or appreciation for how new and foreign and complicated all of this is right now. And it's happening like right now. I mean, there's like no, like you get to ramp up. No, you're supposed to come into it knowing this all. And the agencies that are doling out this money are staffing up, and they're bringing tons of expertise in. And I just really, this is just gonna be really interesting to see how this all plays out. But and the money's there, so that's what folks are going for. But yeah, anyhow, that's my 2 cents worth on
Sarah, thank you. I really like what you said and what Lindsay said, kind of alluding to this issue of partnerships. We've heard this pretty consistently, no matter where in the state we go. Historically, transportation funding has been available for each jurisdiction kind of to do their own thing, but this collaboration just keeps coming up as a more and more important issue as funding constraints. As we all kind of realize that funding constraints are real, and we may need new partners, like you're saying, utilities, we heard school districts,
ports, and then you got to throw, I mean, we'd be remiss to ignore the fact that Washington State was one of 8 green hydrogen hubs designated by the Department of Energy. So, and so bringing that new technology online, and I got to tell you, as somebody who, the more I learn about EVs, ZEVs in general, hydrogen is fascinating. What I didn't expect was that there was a turf warfare between the battery electric people and the hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle people, like the battery electric, no, hydrogen, and it's like, we need it all, and we need it all today. And it's extremely complicated. And how local agencies and all of our transportation partners are supposed to be thinking about the deployment of brand new energy sources commercially available in the next decade, less than decade. Again, there's just no time for anybody to process this and get up to speed and learn about it. And Yeah, and frankly, you can't submit an EV application that doesn't involve partnerships. You can't. So, you know, that's just how that works. And you've got to think about contracting differently, everything. It is upended. And so yeah, it's and it's just on this crazy pace. You know, it's got to be happening now. And sometimes the granting agencies carry on as if our local partners don't understand how important system electrification is. And it's no, they're also out there doing pavement preservation, and they're doing everything else that they are top notch at. And now somehow in their spare time that they don't have any of, they're supposed to get up to speed last week on a whole new energy, you know, just electrification, whatever, whether it's battery or hydrogen. I don't think people really understand how crazy it is out there in the trenches. Both for our utility partners and our local partners and the vendors and everybody and our tribal partners. I was at a meeting last week with 3 of our tribal partners, and just what they're going through dealing with, you throw BIA on top of it all about permitting. Does that permitting have to go through BIA in addition to state of Washington and contracting with sovereign nations? It is remarkably complicated as soon as you get past the scratching the surface of it. And some organizations have the resources and the staff capacity to, you know, have subject matter experts in this. But most of our subject matter experts are doing it with on-the-job training while they are also keeping their transit systems running and their tribal transit programs running and their county road systems going. So it's, I just, yeah, we're enamored with electrification, but I think for those outside of the actual implementation, they have no clue just how complicated this really is out there for our partners. So I'll get off my soapbox. Thanks.
So I see the federal fund exchange came up and we haven't seen that. That was something that the commission advocated for this session, to see the extension of that federal fund exchange. And I know that's so important to small counties with smaller staff, being able to change those federal dollars for state dollars.
On the fact that I think the commission put this out there, it planted the seed, you know, and it supported all 3 of our counties, all 3 of our rural counties, you know, most rural counties had been working on this for a while. And so it was just that combination. This is what I use as an example to point out to people how the WTP, you know, makes the ground fertile for things that some would say is impossible to actually come forward and happen.
Thank you, Thera. I think we'll move on to opportunities unless there's someone else wants to jump on and share more thoughts on these challenges. Okay. All right. So same question, but instead of challenges, let's think about the greatest opportunities for transportation in the next 20 years. So again, think of some that might be in the next 3 to 5 years, as well as if we're putting on our futurist hat in the next 20 years. So same link, same poll. Please provide your feedback there. Okay, technology as an opportunity. Using technology to solve transportation system, using clean technology, EVs and support facilities, transportation being cleaner and on pace to improve. New approaches to increase rural resilience. So love to hear from whoever put that in about what those approaches might look like. Maybe perhaps a love for the single occupant vehicle on a downward trend as folks are growing up, being more used to the shared economy. Will they be okay with not with driving, with not owning a personal vehicle or driving it less? Other opportunities. So a specific opportunity related to Hood Canal Bridge. If we think back to some of the policy pillars that came up as the highest, we had sustainable funding as number one. I think connecting communities and climate were up there. So where are there opportunities around some of those policy pillars that you can think about? All right, increased base funding for RTPOs. We've heard that before. No roadway fatalities as an opportunity. Absolutely an aspirational target, but also kind of an opportunity to bring huge benefit to communities and to the state. I'm going to keep this running, so please keep thinking about what you see on screen, other opportunities. Does someone want to talk about rural resilience? What that means to you? What kind of approach and opportunities there are there? Sarah?
Yeah, that's mine. Sorry to be talking so much. This, I was actually, I learned about this. I was inspired by this working with folks up in the Okanagan. In rural Washington, it's not, resilience isn't about dropping a whole bunch more grid network, transportation. We don't have it. We're not going to. It's rural. But what we do have are hundreds or thousands of miles of logging roads, commercial logging roads that are managed by state and federal land management agencies, as well as commercial logging. And they intersect our state highways. That's how they get trees out of our forests. So when we're thinking about on the Olympic Peninsula, when 101 breaks, and it will break, and it will continue to break, and it will break probably horribly in the lifetime of this plan, if we have established working relationships with our federal and state land management agencies and check to see where these areas are that are prone to landslides and what are our logging roads that might get us around that when the highway washes away there. I'm thinking about like what the DOT did for the Makah Nation when 112 washed out for several months about a year or so ago. And that's what they did. They used logging roads and they went in through commercial logging lands and they bypassed that. And so I think that that's an opportunity. I also think that in our region, we have 4 counties. All 4 counties are required under state and federal law to maintain countywide emergency management plans. Transportation is the first annex in all 4 of those plans because it's considered essential service number 1. And so one of the things that I'd like to see us be doing in the Peninsula region or any multi-county region is get all 4 of those countywide emergency management directors together and see, do all 4 of those plans match at the edges? Do they line up? Because if they don't, that's a problem at a regional level. So I think that there's some very low cost. It's about what regional planning organizations do. They bring diverse people together around the table to work on common issues. And I think that there's some things in rural Washington that are opportunities that don't exist in urban Washington. And we just need the resources to take a look at them, because I think the bang for the buck is tremendous for what you can get just from enhanced coordination and collaboration. So that's what that's about.
Thank you. Yeah, it was interesting in our Southwest conversation last week, just hearing everyone really kind of clinging on to connecting communities, but thinking about it differently than what I was thinking about it for Southwest Washington on the border of on the Columbia. Connecting communities was about resiliency and being able to access the bridges to get to Oregon and to get to neighboring communities. And so I think there's a lot of these threads that are very, just different frames of the same idea, maybe about making sure that communities have access to their everyday needs or to their economic vitality or their health. And so thank you for those ideas.
Well, and Jonathan, if I could just, especially in rural Washington, where a lot of small community economies are struggling. And so when you've got grocery stores closing and suddenly you've got to travel 20, 40, 50 miles to get to a full service grocery store because the grocery store in town's no longer economically viable, resilience starts, it takes on a lot of different dimensions. And then we get to start talking about intercity bus travel and things like that help to fill those gaps. But yeah, it's just the lay of the land is so different in rural places. So
yeah, thank you. About technology, what are people most excited about or most nervous about in terms of transportation technology? Where are the biggest opportunities or the biggest challenges?
I think we all need a cup of coffee.
Yeah, you didn't know you were coming to a workshop today. You thought this was more of a listening to us session. That's okay. No,
we're keeping you working.
Yeah, I'm okay. I've become accustomed to, or used. I wouldn't say accustomed to, but I'm okay with dead air, so it's okay. Becky, and then Kate.
I can just speak a little bit on what. Oh, my camera's off. Sorry, just I work in our traffic group, so we do all the striping and all the signage. And when I think about AVs and what are required, in the striping and stuff, and what maintenance that it goes into that to keep everything up so that autonomous vehicles can, drive safely on our roads, that makes me nervous. Just those extra resources that will be needed to accommodate that.
Absolutely. Kate?
Yeah, I didn't put the technology one. Just what comes to mind is kind of what Lindsay referenced in the chat. Just better apps, better companies coming in, making things more user-friendly, more plain spoke, easy to use, interconnected. Think of like Google Maps, you put in a place, it tells you how to get there via car, via bus, via rail. When it's linked with where you can see if there's been accidents or landslides or when the pass is closed. Technology like that, I think, is what, when I talk with the public about what they appreciate or what they pay attention to, it's usually our technology. They talk about what our social media teams are doing, that, oh, I saw, the WashDOT app got an update and we really like that it now does this. So I think that's something that the public especially pays a lot of attention to and is definitely an opportunity.
Yeah, really good point.
I see Lindsay's comment in the chat, John, if you want to read that out loud.
Sure. So technology, the most recent comment is technology, networking technology that drives efficiency, like car sharing and trip linking. So that was the comment that Kate alluded to. Lindsay also provided some comments on, the state hasn't sufficiently funded fish passage on county and city culverts, mostly because federal courts haven't yet ordered those culverts removed. We need to plan ahead. I'll just read it all for the record. plan ahead for that, and it would be better watershed-based approach for restoring salmon habitat and protecting tribal treaty rights. Also a link to the changing needs of transportation workforce. So thank you for that link. And I think you also provided your note, Lindsay, that you talked about the book. So the How Cities Work book from years ago by Alex Marshall. So thanks for the comments in the chat. I feel like I had something to say. The
I was
workforce,
just
yeah.
gonna just say that, you know, the workforce comment is important. We've heard that around as we travel around, and it sort of surprised me. I'm glad to see that come up as a recognition.
Yeah, and one thing that Kate said that reminded me of this idea that really, you know, if you think about the customer, the user of the transportation system, they're going to pick up on some things that maybe we don't as transportation planners, or whatever your role is. You might be focused on one thing, but you know, sometimes it's useful to just think about what is the customer really experiencing and what do they care about, and what's their kind of primary touch point. So you might be planning a bus rapid transit system with all these bells and whistles and, you know, underground, utility relocation, all this stuff that's really important for it to work. But what do they care about? They care about maybe all-door boarding and real-time information. And so what are how does this improve the user experience and really their interaction with the system that might be the thing that jumps out to them the most. So I think that's a really good point about the information, that people just want information so they can make transportation choices. Other comments on short-term or long-term opportunities? Okay, we're going to move on, but please, this Menti will stay open for a few minutes. So if you want to enter anything else in the Menti chat or put it in the Zoom chat, and feel free to jump in and raise your hand if something else comes up as we're wrapping things up today. So I really appreciate all the comments, all the thoughts that you shared both verbally and in writing. It's really gonna help us as we move forward in the Washington Transportation Plan update. So where this is going, as I mentioned before, this is our fourth out of 6 meetings. We have another one this week. And then another one a couple weeks from now. If you want to register and attend an additional meeting, you can do so by going to the Washington Transportation Commission website and register for those meetings. Us as the team, along with the commission staff, will be summarizing what we heard from you all today and at other meetings. Really distilling some of the information we've heard, coalescing around priorities and focused on developing those strategies to address some of the challenges that we've heard about. We're going to host topic focused meetings later this summer, likely focused on policy pillars. So what did we hear around technology? What did we hear around climate and resiliency? What did we hear around funding? And really dig into some of those, the potential strategies, and get your feedback on those. So look out for more information on those topic focused meetings. And then finally, I mentioned before, we'll come back once we have draft recommendations next year. I did want to save a little bit of time for other agency updates. So if you want to come online, I know we heard from PRTPO at the beginning, but if there's anyone from other public agencies, other stakeholders want to share anything with the group, we got a good collection of folks today. So raise your hand, come online. I do see a hand raised in the attendees. Okay, so I think we see Patrick Lynch, who's going to talk about the WashDOT intercity bus program. So if you want to, Isaiah, you can upgrade Patrick to that, or to a panelist. But is there anyone else on who wants to share a quick update?
Any sort of planning work that's going on you want to talk about, please feel free. Hi, Patrick.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to Patrick, who's representing the WashDOT Intercity Bus Plan. Let me get to your slide.
Thank you.
And I can't really hear you. I'm not sure if that's just me.
There you go. That's probably better.
Sounds
Okay.
great.
Okay. Hi everybody. Just wanted to give a quick update on our statewide intercity bus plan. We're updating an intercity bus plan, which is essentially focused on rural transit and the connections between rural communities primarily. And so it's a statewide plan. We're just kicking it off. We're at the beginning of the project. On the slide here, kind of shows the timeline for our work program. We hope to have a final plan by the fall. And so we'll be going out throughout the state, engaging different communities, and conducting surveys and conducting outreach. So stay tuned for that. We are in the process of developing a project website that'll have more information on the project and status of the project and ability to engage through surveys and other engagement that we hope to have launched here very, very soon. And what I'll do is I will send a link maybe to you, Paula, that we can kind of, then send out to the distribution list here. So we thought this was a good audience for also the plan that we're working on. So I think a lot of the same stakeholders would be, be very similar. So moving forward, we're going to be conducting engagement throughout the state. Like I mentioned, some of it will be kind of online or virtual engagement, but we'll also be using in-person events to supplement that. It'll be later this spring into summer when those things will be scheduled. So stay tuned. More to come on that. And then again, in the fall, we'll have a final plan to share with everybody that summarizes the process for developing the plan and kind of the findings and recommendations. That's it.
Thanks, Patrick. Totally important lifeline service in many places.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Last call for any additional comments or updates. Okay, seeing no hands. I just want to thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. I know everyone's busy, and definitely keep in touch with us. You can go to the website that's linked there to keep updated on the project and to sign up for additional meetings. And we will be sure to share information through Thera, through Mark and Katrina again. So thank you so much, Thera. Thank you for helping us put this on. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you all for joining. We are getting a ton of emails, so if you think of anything or folks weren't able to join and they have thoughts they'd like to share, just send them on in. Transc or one of our emails. Perfect. Thank you so much. Nice to see you there. Bye all.
Bye.